The US Navy just showed us how it could fight the Chinese fleet. With stealthy robots, sophisticated communication systems, and powerful warships, firing high-tech missiles over long distances. The Navy last week sortied from San Diego a flotilla of manned and unmanned surface vessels and submarines. Crews position unmanned aerial vehicles to support the ships. The stealth cruiser USS Michael Mansour, sporting what appeared to be an experimental communication system on its flight deck, led the other ships from Destroyer Squadron 21 into the Pacific Ocean. What followed was a series of experiments and mock battles combining manned and unmanned systems. Robot boats sailing alongside near-shore littoral combat ships, an attack submarine launching an underwater drone, UAV flying overhead the whole time. The so-called fleet problem was a preview of the Navy's possible future, as it reconfigures for high-tech warfare against Chinese forces. The People's Liberation Army is deploying anti-access systems, including submarines, bombers, and missiles, that could make the Western Pacific a very dangerous place for American ships. The Navy is betting on drones to help solve the anti-access problem. The service has proposed to add hundreds of unmanned ships and submarines to its existing fleet of around 300 manned vessels. The idea is for robots to scout for Chinese ships, extending the U.S. fleet's sensor range and helping manned shooters, destroyers, and submarines stay outside the PLA-owned engagement zone. Great plan. Would it work in the real world? The April fleet problem is a strong indication it just might. After several days of experimentation, the Navy on Sunday staged an impressive test of arguably its most promising man-unmanned concept. The amphibious ship USS Anchorage disgorged a barge simulating an enemy warship. The barge apparently carried emitters duplicating radios, radars, and other electronics. The destroyer USS Johnson stood off over the horizon. Exactly how far away is a secret, and initiated a hunt for the pretend enemy ship. UAV and robot boats crisscrossed the ocean. To avoid detection, they kept their active sensors off. Instead, they used their passive electronic receivers to listen for the enemy's own electronic emissions. The drones pinpointed the barge and passed the data to a satellite, which relayed it to Johnson. The destroyer fired an SM-6 missile. The $5 million missile, which can hit targets on the sea or in the air, struck the barge well beyond the line of sight. According to the Navy, it's unclear just how far the missile traveled. In theory, the supersonic SM-6 can strike targets as far away as 300 miles. The distance involved is one reason to celebrate. The other reason is that none of the vehicles involved in the shoot ever turned on their radars. They remained as stealthy as possible throughout the engagement. Experts agree, range and stealth are prerequisites to fighting Chinese forces. The April fleet problem indicates the U.S. Navy is taking these qualities seriously. If there's a weakness in the Navy's emerging manned-unmanned team, it's communication. If robots, satellites, and manned ships can't talk together, they can't fight together. The fleet problem highlights the importance of links between sensors, said Eric Wertheim, author of Combat Fleets of the World. It's one thing to connect robots and manned ships and sink a barge in a test. It's another thing to pull off the same trip thousands of miles from U.S. shores, in the chaos of battle with an enemy who has their own tricks. But you can't deploy new technology and tactics if you don't test them first. The fleet problem is one part of a process that could end, with the US fleet sailing into battle behind a deadly armada of stealthy drones. This is a really positive first sign, Wertheim said. The aircraft carrier George H.W. Bush has spent the past 2 weeks showing off the future of naval aviation, hosting the U.S. Navy's first MQ-25A Stingray unmanned tanker, flying at sea demonstration and conducting the carrier's first F-35C Joint Strike Fighter flight operations. The service announced December 20th it had completed an unmanned carrier aviation demonstration, installing a ground control station on the ship, and proving the UAV could integrate into that carrier environment on a pitching flight deck, with the operator following the hand signals of the aircraft handlers, and with ship-based operators maintaining connectivity even while the drone is midair and away from the carrier. For the demonstration, a prototype MD-5 ground control station was installed in what is being called an Unmanned Aviation Warfare Center, a first-of-its-kind control room that would be set up on carriers to support MQ-25 operations, according to a news release. The team in this control room would coordinate the drone's missions, as well as its approaches to the ship during landing. The Boeing-owned T-1 test vehicle then conducted day and night operations at sea, including taxiing and parking on the flight deck, connecting to the catapult, and clearing out of the landing area. In addition to the team in the control room, MQ-25 deck operators use Boeing's handheld deck control device during these maneuvers, working alongside Navy taxi directors and converting the sailors' directions into corresponding inputs for the MQ-25. Early testing allowed our team the opportunity to evaluate many new systems for the first time at sea with D1, Captain Chad Reed, Unmanned Carrier Aviation Program Manager, said in the Navy news release. Our initial look at taxi operations on the flight deck successfully demonstrated the MQ-25 ability to maneuver just like a manned aircraft in the shipboard environment.